Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Geraci Bardoorian joins Peter and me as we learn about where she is in her practice and a little bit about where she's headed next. It just occurred by coincidence that on the very end of a long period of time that she's worked in human resources and leadership development in a large company, now she's moving on to a whole other venue to apply her practice in new ways, which is what Peter and I have been examining for all of these conversations. So I hope you enjoy Geraci Bardoorian. Well, today we have another practitioner in our conversation. Geraci Bardoorian, one way or another, tell you what she does or will be doing next. But more importantly, to our very deep interest in practice is that we want to get a sense of practice as it sounds when someone's talking about anything. I think it comes through. But I mentioned, Peter, to Geraci, this is an interesting day. It is called, in our conversation, Nothing Day. This is the National Nothing Day. And what that means, Peter, is we are entitled to just be at being. We can be at being. And
it sounds like an idea that came out of Silicon Valley or something.
And so, in a way, if you get past all the credentials and resumes and all the rest, and you want to have a conversation with three very interesting people, we're all being today. But, Geraci, let me throw out the first question.
Okay.
If you were to have a moment in your very busy life where you could just be at being, what would you feel like? How would that feel to you? And would you be bored?
Oh. So, in fact, this morning I was on my way to work, and I have a couple of things that are going through my mind these days as I transition to something, a whole new chapter of life. And I had many things racing through my mind. As well as I also really like to listen to the daily. And so I was curious about the podcast that I had started last night, and I wanted to hear the rest of it. But I also had in the back of my mind, I wanted to have this, I was looking forward to this conversation today. And so I said, I wanted to replay the conversation that Doc, you had shared with me about with yourself, Peter, and about the practice of practitioners. And I started listening, and I had already listened to it. And I said, I don't have time for this. I have to get through all of these different things, and I just have to sift through all of this information. And so I pivoted, and I started doing something else. And then I said to myself, no, this is an important investment in my own personal development, and I really want to hear what they have to say. And I think to answer your question, it's about taking that moment to prioritize that, being able to invest in yourself and your own and your progress as an individual, personally or professionally, as just as important as what I will leave in terms of a legacy or get done today or tomorrow or anything else. And that is something that is important to me in terms of my being and what I look forward to doing and where I spend my time. So
what I was there's a phrase that I had actually come across this morning. If I can remember how it goes, it's from the 19th century, so it's kind of I don't know, old style writing. It has a very old style sound to it. But the guy says it's not surprising that this particular person is having trouble focusing on the really important things in life. And because of what he calls the hurry, noise, and tumult in the streets of life, penetrating too deeply into the house of life, where there's something about the penetrating too deeply into the silent and lonely watcher in the chamber of conscience far apart. The silent and lonely watcher in the chamber of conscience far apart, by which I think this guy means kind of one's inner truth, inner being, dazed and stupefied, this silent and lonely watcher. And then the last kicker is he had no time to think or feel. The hurry, noise, and tumult in the streets of life, penetrating too deeply into the house of life. And, there's a lot of truth or wisdom in this idea of a nothing day when you can step back the way you're talking about, Jackie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what would you say? We would say today, take stock, breathe.
Slow down. I think that's the piece that I keep coming back to is the hurriedness. Is it with purpose? And especially as so much comes at us, with the day-to-day, it's so easy to kind of forget that just by slowing down, you're able to listen better.
Yeah. Busy. Do you keep a to-do list?
I laugh because I'm looking at 5 of them, literally just by looking down right now. I have 5. So yes.
As they say, Jackie, don't look down.
Why 5?
It's a great question. I think if I wasn't in this transition stage, there wouldn't be quite as many. I would transfer one to another. Right now, I'm stressed and I'm disorganized. So I have a personal list, and I have a list of one group, and then 3 of outstanding things that I have yet to do. So that's all right. It'll get done. It feels better to have it written down so that I don't have to focus on all the things I need to do. That sounds contrary, but that's kind of, if I don't write it down, I'll spend too much time being consumed about not forgetting it. So
yeah. And then how do you choose among the 5?
So I
Am I being mean to you?
No, I mean, so where I try to do this is I read there's a book called we call it the Frog Book. It's Eat That Frog, right? So it's really trying to spend the time on what's going to make the biggest impact to the people that need it. What's going to make the impact, and so I prioritize accordingly, the best that I can, and then of course whatever might be on fire. I also have to deal with that too.
I used to have a tablet, but I had a long commute for the last 12 years. I lived in Washington, a 50-mile commute, so that I could have a house on Chesapeake Bay. And I kept this yellow tablet on the seat beside me in my commute, and I was writing down things I needed to do today. And I usually pulled into the office around 9 o'clock or something. And by 10 o'clock, I hadn't done any of them and yet felt terribly busy. By noon, I hadn't done any of them and felt even busier. And I think I only tried one more time to make a to-do list on the seat of the car beside me. I found it very difficult to do because of the hurry, noise, and tumult that kept penetrating too deeply into my house of life, and distracting me and claiming my time and energy. So I know exactly what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm in my 80s and have not cracked this problem. So you've got, in one sense, you have plenty of time. But in another sense, if we don't figure out how to breathe and how to do nothing and all of that, it will still be haunting us 50, 60 years from now.
Agreed.
Wow. Jackie, those lists are about getting done where you are and then moving over to where you're going next. Jackie is Director of Leadership Development in her current role and has designed, and that's my favorite word for Jackie, some extraordinarily well thought out and deeply integrated ways to enhance leadership practice among particularly emerging employees and managers. And now she'll be doing something new. So talk a little bit, Jackie, if you wouldn't fill Peter in a bit about why you've been not only so busy, but feel really so responsible beyond to yourself, but to this large number of people who you've helped over the years in your current role.
Yeah. My passion has been around helping people to see and build new perspective. And my job, as far as I'm concerned, is to help lead them down a path to a door that's open. And they can choose to walk through that threshold or not. But the work in which I spend my time is building the path. And I feel really good about having been convincing enough that this is the right path, and challenging them enough to say, yes, I'm glad I walked down, and through the threshold. And I'm finding that out more now, having these conversations as I exit the organization, that people are very thankful with the opportunities I've created for them in some ways.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I had a very interesting conversation with a woman from Paris, actually, a colleague today, who said, one of the reasons why I have so much respect for you is that you're not doing the work you do is for the right reasons. It's not for the company, it's for the people. And you've always maintained the focus on the people. And so my transition, and where I feel so much responsibility right now, is making sure that I prepare the people to be supported as I exit.
It's a really interesting model that you've shown us of, rather than talking about leadership development as strictly a set of courses and readings and the usual academic approach, you look ahead to where you'd like the people to be. You help them chart a path, but you have to kind of believe in the uncertainty, A, that they're going to find, but B, that they're going to learn how to deal with uncertainty. So that's really cool. You mentioned to me when we were setting up the call that you had an example of a note from one of the folks that who's given you some appreciation for what you've done. Could you find that? Is that handy?
Yeah.
I like Peter to hear that, because I thought it was pretty cool from one of the folks in her very large company.
Says, Jackie, I'm so grateful to have you in my life for your wisdom, advice, friendship, and positive energy. I will miss you for all of these things and more, and wish you nothing but the best, as you fully deserve.
Wow.
And so she's a colleague, somebody that I have worked with in a way where she has been a part of the work I do on the leadership development side. And now she's actually a peer of mine. She had fairly recently changed jobs, and her and I work very closely together. So it's a culmination of that relationship that, I think where that note is really, is the impetus for that note.
And you say you have several statements of appreciation like this?
I do. I'm noticing some themes. Some of the themes have been hearing so far have been around a character, comments on my character about, being invested in that relationship with the individuals, right? There's an authenticity that's underlying there in that theme. Never giving answers, but rather guiding those to find their own answers. And I think some of the ones that I've also really appreciated have been around having a big picture on strategy. So where are we? What are we? Challenging the company to think differently on how we approach our effort.
You talked about being for the people and not necessarily for the company. That puts the finger, so to speak, on one of the absolutely central dilemmas of human resource development. Because when a person is in a mode of development and learning, you don't know where their heads are going to go and where their loyalties are going to go and their energy. And yet there might be senior executives in the company, particularly maybe men, who sort of go, harumph. I thought we spend all this money on human resource development to get people who are totally loyal to the company. And yet they seem to be more interested in the human side of this organization. What are you doing to them anyway? You ever get any feedback like that?
Yes. My feedback has been, pushback on why don't we go this direction, right? And I actually had something come up this morning, which was interesting. So there's another program that another region of the country has fairly recently launched that one could say is almost like a competitor to the program that I had previously designed and implemented that David had been a part of. And I asked a little bit deeper about some of the things and the activities that they do. And they're very much focused on becoming a productive individual contributor to the business. And I don't want to take away from the value that you need to have a core group of skills in order to be able to function in an organization, whether it's being able to sign on to their computer system, whether it's being able to have access to a building, and the list goes on and on. But I think where my challenge has been is that the work within the leadership field is that no matter what industry, no matter what job, no matter where you are geographically, there's a core skill set that's required from leaders. And if we're not able to rise above our pure skills or ability to do a job, we will never be able to truly lead people in a way that's going to be influential or future oriented or strategic. So I think that's been I've been able to prove that through the work that I've done because I'm not doing on the job training. But it has been a leap of faith in many cases in me and my ability to do that.
Yeah. Well, you certainly are living. You're certainly living the dilemma that I mentioned. And you happen to be familiar with the field they call organizational development?
I am.
Yeah. That has been an issue in the OD in OD practice from the very beginning, 1958 or something. Who are we doing this for? Who are we? When we say organization development, do we mean the people in the organization? Do we mean the organization as a whole? What are we doing anyway? And I've been in too many of those conversations and actually contributed some fog to the struggle with that problem. I had something else I was going to ask you. What was it? What is David's characterization of you as a designer? What does that do for you? Is he putting his finger on something that's really important, or something you take for granted, or?
Ironically, if I were to summarize what I think the next role would be in 2 words, one of those words would be designer.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm just psychic.
There's never a better day.
What would the other word be, by the way, before we go further?
It's not quite the right word, but ambassador of sort. I think it's kind of capturing a couple different things. I think ambassador is probably the best way to say it. The designer piece is an opportunity to build a puzzle. And the puzzle pieces are all of the conversations that you have within an organization. Every time you connect with both a leader, an individual contributor, you observed an interaction within an organization. They're all puzzle pieces being created. And so from a design standpoint, where you're able to really start putting those puzzle pieces together in a new puzzle that never before has been developed, is where I think, the design work comes into play. And I know you kind of like sports analogies, so I'll give you one now. I'm a big NCAA men's basketball fan. And every year...
So am I. Having been at UCLA for 6 of the 10 years that they won the NCAA championship, I watched Kareem Jabbar all through his career at UCLA.
Oh my goodness, how exciting.
Before my time.
But every year, so when the Selection Sunday happens and you get your your empty brackets, right? And you go through the process of making your own personal selections. I have found myself in more times than not getting extremely excited about a game that may or may not ever happen. And so it's this, because it's, it's in the Final Four, or it's in, the Elite Eight, or whatever it might be. And I find that that's kind of when I build these different pieces, it's like that same energy of something that I may have the opportunity to put together or move the organization forward. And it may or may not happen, but it's but I see how the leaders on that team, basketball or within a corporation, have the opportunity to really make a real change or progress in a certain area. And by offering this solution, right, they potentially could be going down a path that's already envisioned in my mind, similar to that game in the Elite Eight.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So as I transition to a new role, and why I use the word designer, as being one of the words for this new challenge, is that I'll have a chance to go in and do that very thing with a variety of different clients and potential customers, So it'll be my job to prove my effectiveness in that area. But I love thinking about that game that may or may not happen. So it's really exciting.
What do you think about that, Peter?
Well, if you happen to listen to a lot of ESPN talk shows, as I do, those guys on ESPN are constantly speculating about what would happen if a particular team met another particular team and whose cornerback would be able to handle whose wide receiver and so forth. And they're talking constantly about games that might or might not happen.
Right.
And trying to picture the interaction of the different skill sets that would be present.
It's a great analogy.
And then we have the Minnesota Vikings, who fail to show up in 2 or 3 of the most important games of the season. On paper, a very talented team. In fact, a team that seems to be paralyzed with anxiety.
And in a way, what Jackie's analogy is that she can envision how things could be better in any kind of organizational setting I've ever seen her look at. Regions of the country, subgroups, little small, what we call branches in the company that she's with now, where there's such unique and diverse situations going on. And I can remember so many conversations we've had as we've been looking at the leadership development issues of the company, saying, how did you come up with that? How did you picture that? That's a really cool connection you're making. So I guess, Jackie, consistently from as far back as you can think, you had that love of the game that could happen. You're not reporting history. You're envisioning a future and making people so comfortable that they can reach it. Not completely comfortable. They know there's risk, but they believe that tone of voice, like you hear in the ESPN guys who say with great certainty that the Vikings are finally going to come out of their misery and they're going to kick some serious butt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where all that comment's going, Jackie, but that designer piece, I think, has a tremendous sense of possibility. That, going back to an earlier comment, that sometimes even the way the company is visualizing developing its people, they can't quite see that. It's more tactical. It's more, let's make sure they know how to use their a new kind of software. You, on the other hand, are saying, well, yeah, it's important that they learn to use the software, but what else can we draw from that? What else can they be growing in their perspective? By virtue of the fact that when a whole new software is purchased by a company, there are a lot of people who don't get excited and get frightened that they're going to not show up well. And so how are people going to lead people from one comfortable software to another? Those are the kind of things that used to come up a lot. And what we would do when we were thinking about the future of this leadership program that Jackie designed is, okay, how can we take something that's actually going on in the company, a major change, and build an exercise around that so that people will actually be doing leading while learning leading. Now, let's go to you, Peter, because as far as I know, you've done a heck of a lot of writing and thinking about the nature of leadership. What do you think about that inside-out kind of way of developing leaders?
I think that's the way it actually happens, whether we have much control over it or not. And that's, of course, that's the fate of a lot of designers, where the system does what it damn well pleases, despite your most careful allowances for one contingency or another. And it seems to me that as a designer, you're wise to be aware that you don't have as much control as you might like to have in seeing your designing work fulfilled. So you're really dealing in probabilities. You're also, it seems to me, extremely aware of the the vagaries of personality that your designs are going to be touching and how people are going to react to them. Can I get Department A to stop bickering with Department B? Because a big chunk of what I'm thinking about here depends on at least a dialing down of the amount of bickering that's going on. And what can I do to help that happen? So it seems to me, check me on this, Jackie. You're constantly thinking about the interactions of people. These are not inner chess pieces you're moving around. And the more sensitivity you have to people and how they're going to react to one idea or another, the more likely you are to have some success in designing whatever kind of program or relationships you're trying to influence. A design, it seems to me, when we're talking about human beings, the design is an act of leadership to begin with. Your leadership. And a lot of designers, in my experience, aren't sensitive to that. They do think that, or they inadvertently think that people are chess pieces that can be moved around. And then they feel they have a right to get annoyed when people don't follow the direction that the design is trying to get them to go. I'd be interested in your reaction to that idea that designing is an act of leadership.
I really like that. I like the way that I think it takes, again, courage. I think it takes some innovation. And I think, go back to a previous point about, the people are first, right? I learned a lesson earlier in my career, being an HR professional, that to be truly effective, you've got to find the balance between your role representing the people and representing the business, right? And so my current position, I feel like you start with the people and the business aspects and put it in context of the business, and the business will benefit. So it's not despite the business. It's understanding that the business is behind all of this, and our job is to be able to, or my job is to be able to help those individuals fit more effectively within the business context, and then everybody can be happy, and it works for all. The employee can feel valued, the business can feel valued, and it feels like the right investment.
Yeah.
And another thing I thought about while you were speaking is, being able to understand the individuals and how, again, they're not chess pieces. I guess one of the things I've done somewhat intuitively has been, I've benefited from all of the work I've done with assessments. And I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. Is it because I've learned all about them that I'm now better at it, or because I'm wired in such a way that I'm very curious about how anything would, how each of us react to different things or same things in different ways. And so I think that way. So I'll think more about, and, this is our first interaction, but I know Doc well enough to know some things and some ways in which I can, better position to be able to get the best out of him when we're working together in some cases, and certainly not in a manipulative way, but a way that he can feel like he's giving, again, the best of himself, and we can work more productively together. So that is absolutely, I think, something I hope to bring to the table in some of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very astute sense of the differences among people. But also, as Jackie mentioned, Peter, she's done a lot with DISC and some of the other personality and learning assessments that people, that helps her help her students, in the sense that members of this leadership program get even a better sense of themselves too, so they can be more in tune with the differences in other people.
Yeah. reminded of I gave a talk at one of the OD network meetings. We were in Pasadena, as I remember. And the title of my session was Strategic Management and Organization Development. And it was focused directly on this issue of the people and the business. And I'd had an intuition, a sort of flash, while I was actually on the stage in front of the group looking at the notes I'd made. I blurted out, asked a show of hands. These are all OD people, human resource development. I said, how many of you love the product or service that your own organization or your principal client, if you're an independent, how many of you love what it does? How many of you, think the world is better off by the services of this organization? And then we have a show of hands. There were maybe 200 people in the room. How many hands do you think I saw?
Not many.
About 10, maybe.
Yeah, I would have guessed 10.
Just a smattering, real smattering. And a couple of people I saw quickly pull their hands down when they realized what a terrible minority they were in.
I had to scratch an itch. Yeah, but wouldn't it be lovely if 200 of them put their hands up? Because in addition to whatever else they're doing, they really got a sense of...
Exactly my point. And in fact, I tossed out half of my notes and riffed on that fact or on that observation, that it sure helps when you're working with people and trying to develop leaders and so forth. It sure helps for you to be a believer in what the client organization is doing. Does that make sense to you, Jackie?
It does. And I will say that has been an interesting, I'm very much in the majority of, if I was in that session, I would be in the majority of those that responded, where I don't care about the work we do in a way that thinks that we are doing anything for the world or making it a better place in any way. So I think in some ways that's allowed me to connect to my work a little bit more, because I care about the people and their individual development, knowing that they care about the customer, right? I don't want to sound heartless.
You assume they care about the customer.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you probably have some kind of anecdotal evidence about how they feel.
Yeah.
Now, going forward in your ambassador role, Jackie, it's a different, the company she's in now, Peter, distributes enormous numbers of parts and other services related to the electrical world. Now she's moving into a human resource company. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be an ambassador, Jackie. And you, in order to choose among the various opportunities you considered in the last few months, you had to get something, a little bit of at least a tingle about what they do in the world. And I'm not fair to ask you to talk in any depth at all about the future, but didn't that not fit into the picture when you were looking at different opportunities? Would I really care about what they do? If I represent their product, is it really of good quality?
Yeah, there was, through this process, I consulted with a lot of different people and had a lot of very meaningful conversations. And one of the things I think that really that helped me make a decision about this particular opportunity was the fact that someone shared with me, you are going to be working with customers that care about developing their employees. Otherwise, they wouldn't be even talking to you. And that got me really excited about the chance to extend my my impact and connect with those that this matters, And so my job will be to really understand what their motivation is, what they have from an existing standpoint, but also where they want to go from a future standpoint. So, those are some of the things that I need to be able to represent them in a way that is fair. And what I have faith in is that the products that are going to be offered from the organization which I'm going to will be of high quality and caliber, and will in fact represent what I believe to be the right solutions, a breadth of solutions that will be comprehensive and effective and meaningful.
So this is to retain the people, the best people, and develop them so that they feel committed to their organization, but also, as we talked about earlier, feel growth as an individual, as a human being, so that's not either or. If the company is investing in me, then I'm also going to have some new muscle when I get through whatever you bring into the company. Wow. But it is different. I mean, I can understand why you didn't get all excited when you saw a part with a SKU number on it in an electrician's truck and said, "Oh yeah, my company makes that." On the other hand, it's damn important to those of us who need good parts in our houses. But this is really closer to you. This is you are a human developer of the best sort, and you're going to be in a company that sells solutions to developing people. So wow, and lots of puzzles await you.
That's true.
One of which I will predict. Maybe I'm just being overly, I don't know, realistic or cynical or something. But even that company, you will encounter this paradox between the company or the best interests of the individual people and what I know of them and what I know of their interests and their loves and aspirations. So personally, I don't think you're escaping the dilemma.
No, I would agree. That is something actually I considered in this process was, can I be settled? Can I settle with the fact that I will have some element of salesmanship that I will need to exercise?
Exactly.
And
designing is an act of leadership and salesmanship.
Yeah,
it's true.
That'll be that's the compromise I think I will have to get to and find a place where I can feel comfortable that these are right enough, right? They are going to set you on a better path, company A, than you were going down before. Now, if Jackie was designing it, what would it look like, right?
Exactly.
But that's not necessarily my job. Another area of exploration for me too in the interview process was, well, how willing is my organization to take my feedback to say, this is what I'm hearing in the field. We need to look at how we adapt and to X, Y, and Z. And so I'll have to find a balance there that allows me to continue to be productive without being overbearing.
Well, bear a little bit over, but I think that you've put your finger on one of the true challenges of having a relatively, in quotes, fixed curriculum of offerings, and then being out there representing that curriculum for learning in the real time of when things are coming about, that there's some things that could be changed and should be changed. But I'm confident that they will listen to you, as many have in all of your different stages of your career. Now, we only have a few more minutes, Jackie, and I think it's only fair to let you ask Peter or me any question you wish.
That is an excellent question.
Hmm.
So this will be more on a very personal note, as I have been hearing about you, Peter, for a very long time, and I have
True.
my own perspective on this question. But what did you recognize in David in terms of where you saw he brought a spirit or a perspective that others did not to your field?
Well, I won't say others did not. Different people have different takes on what all this is about, and some of them feel very acutely this dichotomy we're talking about, the business or the people. And by the way, there's a man named Shel Davis who's one of the original OD practitioners who, in his own lifestyle and value system and work at TRW Systems in Redondo Beach, California, kind of almost defined what the OD practitioner is going to be up to. Anyway, I was walking along the street one time with him, chatting about the business and the work and all of that. And I said, do you have a personal credo or a mantra or something you say to yourself in times of stress that kind of carries you along, is what you're all about personally? He said, sure. It was right on the tip of his tongue. He said, love the people and hate the system. And that declares where he personally stood on this dichotomy. And yet he was not at all perceived as disloyal to the company. In fact, TRW made him the vice president for big TRW in Cleveland. And then he went to be all of Europe for digital equipment, which no longer exists, I don't believe.
No.
So he was a definite contributor to the needs and focus of the organization. But for him, what was meaningful was love the people and hate the system. And I think by that he meant hate the worst elements in human systems, the tendencies to get political and the tendencies to define who are the winners and who are the losers, and to be locked up in a militaristic hierarchy and all the different kinds of things we know that organizations do. But what I saw in David, actually something very concrete, which he will remember. I did an exercise in class one night asking people to write poetry. And I think the assignment, remind me, Dave.
Write a poem about the course.
Write a poem about the course, was it?
Yeah.
And then what the students did not know is that I was going to put them in groups of 4, 5, 6. I guess there were about 30 in the class. Mm-hmm. Put them in groups of 4, 5, or 6, and then give them a different challenge. Instead of writing a poem, the challenge was, in your group of 6, each of you has written a poem. In your group of 6, which is the best one? And that put them in a conflict right there of interest between the needs of the group to make a decision and their own needs to have their own personal poem win, so to speak. That was the exercise. Dave wrote a very memorable poem, which I can't quote to you, but the course number was IA 338 in Industrial Administration 338. And I remember it had a line in it, I love you, IA 338.
That's right. It was an ode. But
and,
that was a great moment because I finally got to have some fun in a college class. And not that I didn't have some in previous classes, but that was kind of one of those moments where Peter enjoyed it. The group thought it was a good program. And I was thinking, hey, OB, organization behavior, we can do about anything and it works. I mean, it all comes together, whether. So, yeah, thank you for that, Peter. And that's the last good thing he remembered me doing. The rest, the blur.
And I wanted to continue with this hymn to Dave.
Okay.
I think the reason that I've always remembered that poem, but the reason that I involved Dave in this, invited him in to work with me on this project of understanding practice, was because we've talked on the phone probably at least once a year, and often more often than that. The whole time that Dave's been pursuing his career and I've been pursuing mine, and he'd call me up and tell me about some exercise or some design that he has instituted in a class or in his role as a department head or other administrative leadership roles he's held. And I was always impressed with his feel for the relations of theory and practice. There was always plenty of theory in the work he did, but his work also revealed an intuitive understanding of practice. And I thought that made him a perfect colleague for this project. So that's kind of the and I must say in the now about 13 months that we've been working together on this project, he has more than fulfilled. I would say he's doing most of the work these days, because my health has been very poor. And in particular, this whole Zoom application and these podcast ideas are, he's doing the leadership on those things. So that's kind of an extended answer. Can I ask you one more question, Jackie?
Yeah, this is all we got time for is one more answer. So
I wanted to ask you, we've talked so much about what you're doing for others, and I just wanted to know what you're doing for yourself. And what's your own developmental agenda, if you have one, or even if you don't have one, what are some of the kinds of things that energize you and help you to develop?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say that there's one of the things that the journey that I've been on the last year or so, one of the biggest lessons I've walked away with is an ability to be vulnerable. I have found that I tend to be a fairly independent person that has, a vision for, name it, and I'm going to figure out how to get it done. And it's been incredibly obvious at times that I don't know how to approach finding a new job or getting myself out of the places where I have the valleys I have been in at times. And so being more deliberate and intentional at asking for help, and not because you necessarily need it, but because you have an interest in learning from others in a way that's that's going to expose you, but also create a learning opportunity for you. So that's what I'd say has been like my biggest learn, and I want to continue to grow in that way. So this network that I've been able to create, it's just really important for me that I keep it really active, and that's hard for me to do. And so that's definitely a place where I want to continue to focus in on as I look ahead.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's really my last line of questioning, Dave. But I really want to thank you for taking the time on this, Jackie. It's taught me a lot.
I agree. And in doing this right at the cusp of having to close down on one part of her life and open up another professional part of her life. She could have begged off and easily said, well, this is not a good time, but she didn't. And in fact, as she said when she said hello to us in this call, she said, I decided that this hour and a half with Peter Vale and David Fearon was for me. Right? And it was for us. It was a wonderful feeling that I'm left with, and that we've had this call, and Jackie's given us this vulnerable moment in her time to think with us about, without only using the word once, practice. As the whole thing has been really about you as a very impressive practitioner, ambassador who designs.
Well, thank you.
So, thank
and
you
this has been
much.
an honor for me as well. David has been a mentor for me for, I don't even want to say that. I can't calculate the numbers. I'm in HR, first of all, but second of all, it's too long. And the fact that, Peter, you have been such an influential person in David's life, as well as in the field in which we're all passionate. This is absolutely, I feel just so grateful to have been included. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Is there such a thing as a group hug on Zoom, Dave?
Yeah, it's a virtual hug. You have to imagine it. Okay, we're going to end this call with a hug. Now, I'm not going to end the meeting. I'm just going to end the recording. Okay. Peter's hugging you with his hands.